Hey, everybody. Welcome to the premiere edition of the Aftermarket Insider podcast. I'm your host, Joe Sebergandio, and I want to thank everybody for joining us today. I want to kick off some thank yous to our presenting sponsor, our friends at Pioneer Car Electronics. You know, Pioneer is a global leader in car electronics, and they're proud supporters of a variety of automotive events. No matter what you drive, Pioneer's got the gear for your ride to make it sound better. It includes all their latest technology, including Bluetooth, Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, and new for 2020, Amazon Alexa. Remember, don't break up with your car, upgrade it. Learn more at pioneercarelectronics.com. Folks, we got a great podcast in store for you. We've got Tom G, the Vice President of Events of SEMA, joining us, and we'll be talking about the straw that stirs the drink in our industry, the SEMA show, and the current status in light of this interesting, to say the least, coronavirus pandemic. We're also going to be talking to Ron Coleman. Ron Coleman, the current head bigwig at Driven Racing Oils. And many of you know Ron from his time leading up the Comp Performance Group. Always an interesting guy, a lot of good insight from the past, and just a cool guy to spend some time with. We're lucky to have both of those guys joining us on the podcast. We'll also have a little treat for you, including the Barnes Report. The Barnes Report is brought to you by yours truly and Clarence Barnes. Obviously, Clarence is a name and a face and a voice that many of us are familiar with. He hosts iconic events like the Hot Rod Power Tour, the Sand Sport Super Show, the Off-Road Expo, Joe's Mini Bike Reunion, and he's also a major player in the music industry, hanging out with the likes of Eminem and Beyonce and everybody else. You probably heard him on iHeartRadio. He was one of our go-to calls when we thought about doing the podcast, so we're looking forward to having Clarence on. And Clarence is going to give us some inside skinning on what's happening in the industry. His tentacles go pretty deep, so you never know what we're going to hear from Clarence, and we're looking forward to that. Once again, it's the Barnes Report. Guys, a little bit about myself. For those of you who may be listening and had taken the time from your busy schedule, hopefully this is a face that you know. I've been involved in the industry since '82, so I'm dating myself a little bit. I started off working in automotive events at Peterson Publishing Company, working for Lee Lasky and Dick Day. I was then relocated selling ads at CarCraft Magazine, working for Jim Adolph when we kind of went away from the event business, and I spent some time slinging ads there. I ended up graduating and working with Ralph Panico when we formed something called the APG, which was a group of magazines in the Peterson fold. And I love my time working there with Ralph. And for those of you who knew Ralph Panico, obviously Ralph's no longer a great guy and mentor. Ralph helped me along my way. I became a publisher of Sport Truck, four-wheel and off-road, and four-wheeler, and had some time to spend with Dave Freiberger and Rick Payway and all those off-road guys, which was a great time for me. I then spent a little bit of time at Motor Trend, Sport Magazine, and then things changed. Peterson was bought by another company, EMAP, and I went on to work at events there. Had a great time, learned a lot, worked with Harry Hibbler, Jim Savis, and many other cool guys. And then things changed for me in a much bigger way. SEMA was going through some changes, and I was provided an opportunity to go represent them independently, selling sponsorships. And I had a nice run doing that, and really had a chance to meet with and really have a chance to engage with many of you who are hopefully watching now. So I've been fortunate to take all this time working in the industry to parlay that into my own little gig here. It's Motor Media. We're a sales and marketing agency in the industry. Myself and Brian Paik launched Motor Media back about, 15 years ago. And I'm still fortunate enough to work with SEMA, to work with companies like Bonnier Events and others, Pioneer. So I stay active in the industry. And during this pandemic, I really wanted to follow up on an idea I had about doing a podcast in the aftermarket industry. I currently have a podcast that I do now for Joe's Mini Bike Reunion. Those of you who have attended the event, it's been going on for 9 years. You know I'm a mini bike nut. But honestly, I've got more contacts and more friends in the automotive industry. So doing this podcast now It was just, in my view, the right time. What can you expect? Well, you can expect me to screw up a few times. In fact, I probably have already done that enough. I'll bounce around a little bit. We'll have some serious conversations. We'll share a few cheap laughs, but hopefully we'll give you some insight and some information that'll make the time that you spend with us worthwhile. I want to keep this going on a weekly basis, and that's our plan, to have this podcast available to you once a week through July. In July, we're hopeful that we'll be able to expand to 2 podcasts per week. We're going to keep them about an hour, give or take. If you'd like to be considered to be on the show, or if you'd like to suggest somebody or a topic, hey, just send in a note. We have an email address. You'll have the opportunity to send in some comments. It's www.theaftermarketinsider.com. And I want to also take a second to thank Emmanuel Munda. Emmanuel is my producer. He's also a partner in this venture. He produces my Joe's Mini Bike Reunion podcast. He's a good friend. He's a neighbor, and he's the guy behind the scenes making all this happen. So if you are listening and you'd like to have a comment read or a question read for either of our guests, please take a moment on the Facebook Live opportunity and jot down your question. We'll try to get to it if we can, and enjoy yourself. So when we came up with the idea about doing the podcast, it's like, well, gee, who do we want to have on the podcast? And, what do we want to talk about? And as soon as I asked myself that question out loud, my answer was made for me. It was Tom Gattuso. Tom is the vice president of events and is the guy who's got the keys to the fastest car in the industry, which is the SEMA show. I'd like to, if I could, welcome Tom to the podcast. Tom, thanks for making some time for us. How you doing this morning?
I'm doing great, Joe. Thanks for having me. This is I think, a great thing to be doing at this time. So I wish you luck.
Thanks, Tom. I'll need a little bit of that, but my task is a little bit easier when I'm able to secure guests like yourself and Ron. How are you making out working from home? How's that working for you?
So we're doing pretty good. This is actually day 28. So I'm keeping track right here on my chin, but we're doing good. We moved our entire company remotely, and we're fortunate to be able to do that. So our main thing really is to be able to be here for our members and help them in this time of critical need, but also all year long. So it took us a couple days to transition, but now being 4 weeks in, we're really hitting a stride and moving forward well.
Well, I would be remiss to not start off with the question everybody probably is asking. And I'm wondering how you're getting any sleep at all, knowing that it's got to be something that you continue to hear about, is what is the status of the show? Will it be postponed? How are you replying to some of those questions that I'm sure are coming down the pike?
So right now we're hearing it, and we're really focused on the event in November. And we feel like we're going to be able to get through this and get to a back to work scenario where we'll be able to create an environment in Las Vegas that people feel comfortable in. And that's really going to be our goal, is to create this level of certainty that when you gather together, you're not at risk. And that's something that we're currently working on. And I would say that probably helps me sleep at night. Knowing that we're going to have this show, it's a light and a beacon for our industry. And I've come to really believe that it's going to help us recover more quickly. So, really, when you put the nuts and bolts of what the show is together, it's just this place that we can connect people, a buyer and a seller. We connect ideas. And I'm really pushing to be able to create that so the industry can come together and connect and help us through Q4 and into Q1 next year as we really start to recover and get back to some level of normal. So that's what's helping me sleep at night. And I got to tell you, I'm sleeping really good because we've got an incredible industry that we're supporting. And as we're doing some outreach to them, they're really resilient. And that this isn't going to get them down. And we've got a great team of people that work on all the stuff we do as a staff at SEMA. So really, it's great to be able to have that confidence that we've got a great team behind us. We've got a super passionate industry that we're serving, and we're this beacon that's going to happen in November that's going to help the whole industry recover quick.
Tom, I guess if there was ever an event or a trade show that most folks would risk their health for, it's got to be the SEMA show, because, let's face it, most of the parts there aren't really those that are necessary. They're more of a want and a passion for. Do you think that because of that, that's why that positive, we're definitely going no matter what attitude prevails?
I just think what's happening right now is people are going through different phases of transition, and in some cases, companies are hurting. And our role as an association is to be here in a time of need like this, and really advocate for the industry. So, to some extent, we're hearing people that want to know about programs and resources that we've got set up. Things like the PPP program, which is your payroll protection, and the economic industry disaster fund. Those types of things are what some people are looking to know about. But I think as you're going through this transition, you have to have this confidence that things are going to turn around, and we're kind of the next step in that, where you shore up your business and you figure out how you're going to last through this, and then you see what the ramp up time is going to be like, and kind of right in the middle of a lot of the ramp up planning is going to be this trade show. So we're hopeful that as we get into the third quarter of this year, things are starting to bounce back a little bit, and certainly as we move into the fourth quarter, which is where our show's positioned, companies are going to be really wanting to get together and figure out how and what the angle of escalation is going to be. And the reports I'm seeing, and I'm trying to be as optimistic as I possibly can, but the reports I'm seeing is that Q1 of next year are going to be some growth times. So really that's my hope, is that we're going to be this great resource that's going to help people figure out what the next 1, 3, and 5 year plan is going to look like, having just hit this pause button.
This upcoming space selection for the show, which takes place in early May, May 4th, that's going to be a good opportunity for you, Tom, as well, to dialogue, although the system for the space selection is changing a little bit. Can you talk about some of those changes and what your expectations are for this upcoming space selection?
Yeah, absolutely. And you've helped us with the space draw in past years, so you know exactly how it works behind the scenes. And really what we've done in the past is we've put 20 people in a room, and we've got everything from sales to accounting to customer service and IT. And they tasked me this year to see how we're going to be able to do that. And I feel it's important to stay on schedule. So we're scheduled to have it from May 4th to the 20th. And the reason for that really is to, again, just give this confidence to the industry that the show's going to happen and that progress is being made. And if we were to delay it, it could delay things down the road, like how soon our floor plan gets up, how soon our exhibitor list is ready. So it was a conscious effort to keep it in that May timeframe. But we're going to do everything remotely. So we're going to have a giant Zoom call like this, where we're going to pretend we're in one big room, but our sales team is going to be doing the phone calls individually to each of the companies. We'll have all the same behind the scenes stuff working. So we're excited to see if, in theory, we can put it to work. But I will say this, and again, it talks about the resiliency and the planning that our industry does. Right now, we've got a tremendous amount of support in the form of applications. So truth be told, we've been taking applications since the show closed in November. And nobody really knew anything about what we were going to be facing right now. But we've got just about 2,000 companies that have sent applications in. And we're expecting that we're going to have a really positive space draw. But one of the things that we did here from our members was really, what happens if they need to cancel, or what happens if we cancel. So we made some policy changes to make it a little bit easier for companies to join the show. One of the most, dominant ones is what our refund policy was, because people were worried if they put a deposit down and picked a space, would they be able to get their funds back? So normally we would make your deposit not refundable 24 hours after you picked your space. In this scenario, we're going to go all the way till September 1st, because we wanted to remove doubt whether or not a company knew they'd be able to make it through this. So our job really isn't to keep deposits. Our job is to produce this industry event that connects people. So we've extended that, and we've started on case-by-case basis, is really talking to people and seeing what it is they need and how we can best serve them. So we're optimistic that we're going to have a strong space draw. We're going to get through this process of the summer, and as we start to round that corner in September, there's going to be a lot of optimism, and we're going to be able to produce a great event.
Tom, there's a group of folks that I guess we share. I call on a lot of folks that are manufacturers in the industry for some of the other work that I do. And the SEMA show has come up, just like other big events that take place in the fall, enthusiast events, Off-Road Expo, Sand Sports Super Show, those larger events that happen later on in the year. So I'm having conversations with similar folks that attend those shows as well as attend the SEMA show, and they ask about things like refunds. My view has always been SEMA was always there. When people would ask me about whether or not they were going to get their deposit back for a booth at SEMA, I almost fast forward to, I was almost waiting for you to say, hey, this year SEMA's picking up the tab.
Right.
You're so gracious in so many ways, like what you do with the exhibitor summit, where you have folks come out on your nickel and take care of everything to help them be better. So I'm saying things like, hey, the last thing you have to worry about is getting your deposit back. Knowing those guys, they'll be providing you with free drayage or free hotel rooms, or, if need be, SEMA's always been there. They may even pay for your booth. So I would hope that most of the folks in the industry know that deposits and refunds and those types of things should be the least of their worries. Can you tell us about things that are much more important, though, about what you internally are talking about beyond hand sanitizers and gloves and 6 feet of separation? I mean, what are you really focusing in now, in light of the fact, Tom, that even if the show does exist, there's going to be some hesitancy that many people have about going out in the public? Can you share any of that insight?
Yeah, it's going to be one of those things where it'll be similar to what happened after the shooting at the Mandalay Bay. And one of my jobs at SEMA that I'll probably remember the most was I was the single point of contact for people that called and asked what the security plan was for the SEMA show 30 days after that terrible event. And I remember conversations that I had with people where they were scared to leave their house, and just knowing that there was somebody that had a plan was all they needed. So this isn't exactly the same, but we're going to be able to draw some similarities where there will be a plan, and it's going to be an opportunity for SEMA, but even for our events team, to set a benchmark for what the industry should and can do at an event. And really, it's this opportunity to create an environment that people feel safe in, and that when they gather, they don't have this worry that they're in danger. So that's really going to be the overarching goal of it. Is we're going to establish this new normal, and we're going to establish these new social protocols, and we need to make you feel that we're completely up to speed with it, and that you're safe in the environment that we create. So really, we would be at a loss if we just said, yep, it's back to work just as normal. we're not going to do that. We're really taking the opportunity to put not only the automotive industry, but the trade show industry on notice as to what things can really be done to help people feel comfortable and get the business at hand that needs to be done, an environment for them to do it in.
Tom, what is pre-registration or request for attendance? What is the status of some of the places like Italy and China? Can you share any of that with us in terms of what kind of feedback you're getting?
So we haven't opened registration yet. It opens in April, and it's going to be opening on time here soon. But we haven't had a lot of feedback from other countries. We're hunkered down right now, mostly with contacting our members, and we did a couple different things where we did a survey to our membership, just to kind of ask a series of questions, and we've got that posted on our SEMA e-news, and you can find it on SEMA.org. But the other thing we've done is we've got a team together internally that's calling all of our members one at a time just to see how things are going, if there's anything we can do to help them. So those are the types of things that we're really focused on right now. That and we've put together a resource page, again, for our members to be able to go in and find out what the SBA loans are about, what the economic disaster loan is and how it's different from the Paycheck Protection Program, those things. I think we're going to evolve to where we start to hear from companies from, or countries from, say, Italy or Spain and people that are harder hit. And we're really going to rely on our local and federal authorities for that. We're forecasting that they're going to be down because I think international travel is going to be impacted for a period of time. But at the same time, as long as we can create a safe environment and the people that come into it are also safe, we should be okay.
Tom, just one more time, just for some clarity here. Knowing that you're maintaining a positive and proactive view on producing the show, does the state have the opportunity to step in and say, no go?
They do.
And is that the ultimate, level of what's happening? Is that call from the state rather than what you want to do or what SEMA wants to do?
Yeah, we have to be able to do the show in the convention center. So if the convention center tells us that we can't do the show, we're going to have to abide by that. But, in all the scenario planning that we do, when we thought about holding the show after the result of this current environment, SEMA canceling the show, or the convention center canceling the show, the likelihood of SEMA canceling the show, but the convention center telling us we can do it, is very, very low, because we know that this is going to be this great resource. So we're going to do everything we can to make that happen. And Joe, if I can just spend a minute, and I know I've been talking a lot, but on just call it dispelling rumors or giving an update on what's going on at the building. There's a couple things that I think are timely. One of them is they're right in the middle of figuring out if they're going to put overflow hospital beds into the South Hall. And that's something that FEMA has been to the building. They're going through a process right now of bids, and there's a high likelihood that they're going to put some hospital beds in the South Hall. So there's not a timeline for that, but we're watching that closely, and we're in tune with the people that work at the convention center that are also working with FEMA, just to be able to get updates pretty much on a daily basis at this point. So the other thing that I'm looking at, though, is when you look at the curves that we're all looking at state by state on how this virus is rising and falling, it looks like Las Vegas has got a great surplus right now of hospital beds. And my hope is that they're not going to use what they're preparing for, but it makes sense as a legislator or somebody that's leading a state to want to be able to have something in Las Vegas for overflow. Still not known if that's going to be COVID patients or non-COVID patients, so it's all up in the air. I have a hope that they're going to be doing so well that they do it, and it will be like the hospital they built in Washington, where they built it and then dismantled it. But the other thing to note is the construction that's happening and the renovation project.
That's still going on, correct, Tom?
That's still going on. So the construction is still happening, and it's because it's funded, and that's the key. So the new West Hall is completely funded, and so is the people mover that the boring company is doing. So those are going on as scheduled, and they're going to be ready in December of 2020. But news for our industry is the renovation project isn't funded right now. So they're going to make a recommendation to their board. Actually, it's happening today that that get postponed for a minimum of 2 years. So, to look at it optimistically, in 2021, we essentially will get the new West Hall plus North, Central, and South. And in the old scenario where they were going to go right into renovation, we weren't going to get the North Hall right away. So we're looking at that in terms of scenarios and trying to figure out that plan. But there's a lot going on at the convention center, and there's a lot going on in Las Vegas. And we'll try to update you as soon as we can and as transparently as we can. But if you're reading things like anything like that in the news, know that right now the plan is that we've got a clear runway and we're good to go.
Tom, due to the importance of the SEMA show and all these questions that folks have leading up to it, the SEMA show, it takes a lot to get ready, whether you're setting up your booth, making travel arrangements, working with the vendors on whether it's your carpeting or your signage. It takes time to get ready. It's not like, okay, we're going to go. Is there a date in your mind? Is there a come to Jesus date, or we have to really either put 100% in or make a change? Is there a time in your mind that we're going to have to shoot as a target to figure out what's happening one way or the other?
There is, and we want to be cognizant of how people are planning and how they spend their money. So I talked earlier that we have a September 1st date where you can get a full refund. Some of our partners are lockstep with us on that. Freeman is one example, where they're saying, yeah, if you want to plan and order stuff, you can cancel, and we'll pick a date, whether it's September 1st or September 15th. But we'll pick a date and say, okay, at that point, you get a full refund from SEMA, which is September 1st, from Freeman, which is likely to be, say, September 1st as well. From a show standpoint, we're really looking 90, 60, 30, and 15 in terms of those scenarios. So 90 days out, we'll look at it a certain way. 60 days out, we'll look at it really hard. At 30 and 15, that's when a lot of work starts to get done. So, we're going to really need to be in close communication with the convention center and what's happening. But, I would say right in that September 1 timeframe, we're hoping that we're going to have a view of the light at the end of the tunnel and be able to make some really critical decisions at that point. And I think they're going to be good ones.
Well, Tom, look, we're so thankful for the efforts. So many of us, the SEMA show is our annual way to connect. I think we've got some good leadership, knowing the folks that are with your team, listening to you on the podcast. Thank you for the insight. Thanks for spending some time with us. He's Tom Gattuso. He's the Vice President of Events at the SEMA show. He's our premier guest on the podcast. Thank you so much, Tom. We'll chat back with you. Hopefully we'll follow that 90-day, 60-day schedule. Look forward to hearing back from you about the success from the space selection. And we hope that that goes well for you and for all the exhibitors that'll be participating. Once again, Tom, thanks for joining us on the podcast. We'll be talking to you soon.
Yeah, Joe, and let me just leave it again with just checking in for updates with us. Our resources that we talked about are on SEMA.org, and that's where you can find the latest update on the resources we've got for coronavirus stuff. And semashow.com you can check in with and also find out what's going on with the show. But this is really the time to plug into things like e-news and SEMA News, because that's where we're going to be doing some of our updating, and then podcasts like yours. So thanks again for having me. I hope I cleared the decks for Ron, because I was intimidated. He's such a great guest and he's going to give you such good insight. So I'm glad for you that you're doing this, Joe, and wish you luck, man. We'll talk soon.
Thanks, Tom G. I really appreciate it, brother. We'll catch up with you soon. All right, folks.
Thanks.
So we had a chance to talk with Tom G. It looks like it's full steam ahead for the SEMA show. And, that's the attitude that's prevailing. If you talk to anybody who's attended that show as a manufacturer, or as a featured vehicle owner, or as an attendee, or as a buyer, this shows everything to all of us in this industry. And we're all hopeful that this virus calms down, and we're all out there shaking hands and talking to each other shortly. Folks, a segment in the show that we came up with is called the Barnes Report. It features Clarence Barnes. Welcome to the podcast, Clarence. How you doing, brother?
Man, things are good. It's been a wild few weeks, as you know, man. I'm telling you, this is it's interesting, between the Power Tour, between all the shops and everybody being in different, working at home. It's weird. It's a weird time, but we're talking about SEMA, and I can see it. That's the wild thing. I could feel it. It gets my brain going. I'm going, I can't wait.
You just can't touch it, Clarence.
I know.
So, one of the bigger events that's on just about every car enthusiast calendar around this time of the year is the Hot Rod Power Tour.
Boy, I tell you, this is a big thing right now. My phone's blowing up. The internet's blowing up. I mean, the Power Tour, if you've never been on it, is basically like 7 days. This year, it's June 7th through the 13th. 7 states, 6.5, 7 days, depending on how you play it. But it's basically 5,000 cars, 5,000 to 6,000 cars, and over 100,000 spectators. It's like the world's largest rolling car show. And I've been involved in it, gosh, for years.
You're the host. You're the MC. You're the air traffic controller for the Power Tour.
It's kind of cool. You get to see all your friends from all over the world. As a matter of fact, we have people who come in every year from South Africa, New Zealand. The stories are legendary about the Power Tour. But this year, so many people are talking about my phone rings at least once or twice a day. Somebody saying, hey, so what's going on? I saw this. There's so many rumors and so many things going on about whether they'll pull out, whether it'll continue. And really, the interesting thing I always bring people back to is what it takes to bring the Power Tour, to 7 states. I mean, this year it's going to be ZMAX, Martinsville, Bristol, Kentucky Speedway, Indy, Fort Wayne, and then it ends up at Summit in Norwalk, Ohio. And to get 5,000 cars through small towns and things like that is really, that's the game. It's not just like saying, yeah, we're going to go here and do this. And it's a small team of people who do nothing but this all year. And we run the tour twice to make sure the route doesn't change. And this year, people are talking about changes, but there's Hot Rod's working on some details to make sure everything can be done. And I guess what I'm told is we're pretty close to some sort of announcement, but nothing for sure yet.
Okay, because that's the $20 question. Is it going to happen? Because just like SEMA, you got to get ready to go on the Power Tour. It's 60 days out.
Yeah.
I had a chance to talk to some folks that also are rabid Power Tour fans. Boris from Street Machinery is one of them, and all the guys who are, the Posies and the Scott Whitakers from Dynamat, all those guys who love the Power Tour. And they were mentioning that they hadn't heard anything, yet they were optimistic that it would happen. There has been some talk about there being an issue with the finale in terms of hotel availability. I'm sure it's going to be a hot topic for everybody as these weeks lead up to the tour. And keep us abreast of that, Clarence. Have you talked to any guys that go on the tour that are wondering the same thing?
That's the wild thing about the Power Tour. People say, what's it like? I'm like, you'll go on a tour, you'll meet you'll come back with 100 friends. Instantly, you'll have all these friends that you'll have for a lifetime. I was talking to Mike Copeland last night. He's got his rig's gonna have QA1, E3, Redline. I mean, a list of people. So his schedule is kind of difficult to move around and make things happen. But he says, he goes, I go to drive it. And I tend to think people are going to be there regardless. I don't know how, what exactly is going to happen so far, but people are just so avid about this. They build their whole life around it.
Yeah.
It's like
look, if they hold the event, Clarence, folks will go. It's just, you really wonder about the volume, knowing that events as we knew them are still a little bit up in the air. You and I were chatting a little bit about some of this virtual racing.
Yeah.
That's going on.
This is a big thing. I got into this years ago because it's much cheaper. You can get on like iRacing, for instance. That's pretty much what all the pros jump onto because the tracks are digitized. They're really high quality and you get to race. You could be racing against a pro driver in your class. And so what's happened is, basically live events, the bottom fell out. So, I mean, millions and millions of people watch NASCAR. So NASCAR, Formula One, IndyCar, World of Outlaws, everybody's going virtual. And when it started, NASCAR's first race, when they posted it up, did like 900,000, which is a lot in the virtual world. Nothing when you talk about what NASCAR is. By the time they hit Phoenix, I think it was like 4.6 million. And interesting things are starting to happen because you have different people involved with these races, all pros, but some interesting names make it up into the pro ranks. And recently now we're starting to get the stories because you've got all the, when you're watching it, it looks just like, I mean, you can see it on Fox Sports. It looks just like you're watching a race and you can hear people. And then, Jeff Gordon's there and he's doing play-by-play. Well, recently on iRacing, number 43, I think it's Bubba Wallace, Richard Petty, his driver. He gets in there and he gets thrown into the wall. This is lap 11 of 150. And they're at Bristol. So Clint Boyer cuts him off, goes in the wall, and splats him. Well, there's generally a lot of carnage and yellow flag and all this kind of stuff in real life. Well, in virtual, he just said, well, y'all have a good one. Peace out. And he stops his car, gets out. You see the announcers on TV going, what do we do? You can't reset it. There's the car. People are driving around. So flash forward, Bubba Wallace goes out and he starts tweeting, talking about it. Goes, yeah, it's just racing. What a game. It's all a joke, this kind of thing. Well, Blue Emu, if you're a Richard Petty fan, a fan of the King, Richard Petty loves Blue Emu. And they're also a real life sponsor of the real live NASCAR team. So Blue Emo responded to Bubba Wallace's tweet and they said, good to know where you stand. Bye-bye, Bubba. We're interested in drivers, not quitters. So that's the way that went down. So real life things are happening through this virtual world. The numbers are up. We're getting into the millions. So it's something kind of interesting to watch.
Yeah, today Kyle Larson stole all the headlines for being suspended by NASCAR for using a racial slur. Obviously, some of those folks are still finding their way, realizing that they're talking to big audience. I think Chip Ganassi canned him after all that. So, during this testy time, I say everybody should get a pass, including him. Clarence, we've got a couple things left on the podcast. I'm going to be bringing in Ron Coleman. Interesting to spend some time with him. A major coup getting him on the show. Why don't you keep those tentacles expanded? Keep your ears and your nose to the grind. This power tour itself, because the magnitude of the interest and the types of people that are in our industry that support that and have a lot riding on that, that's going to be an important topic if you could stay on that. I know you're directly connected to the folks over there at Discovery. So thanks for that work there. Bring us some stories. I know that you're doing a lot. Bring us some stories. We'll look forward to having you on as we expand this segment going forward. And thank you, Clarence, for all you do in our industry. Thank you for being there when we dialed you up to see if you'd be a part of the show. It's a feather in our cap to have somebody as professional, as well-respected, and just an overall great guy. My wife loves you. And you're always entertaining too. So you give Clarence a cup of coffee or two, and I'm telling you, you're going to have a great rest of your afternoon. So it's Clarence Barnes from the Barnes Report. He'll be joining us in future podcasts. Thank you so much, Clarence.
You got it, Joe. Thank you so much.
All right. So folks, we have been doing our own little networking within the community to promote being safe. And we were fortunate enough to have a couple of folks do a couple little spots for us. Emmanuel, could you share a few of the spots?
Hi, everybody. I'm Peter McIlivray from Bonnier Events. Thanks for tuning in to the Aftermarket Insider podcast, hosted by my good friend, Joe Sebergandio. Stay safe, everybody. And for God's sake, stay at home. The sooner we get this thing behind us, the sooner we're going to be able to meet up at our four-wheel jamborees, the Sand Sports Super Show, Jeep Invasion, the Street Machine Nationals, and the Off-Road Expo. See you soon.
Hey everyone, this is Tammy with Driven Racing Oil. If you can, stay home, be safe, because I look forward to seeing each and every one of you either at a race or at a show. Much love, and see y'all soon.
Hey, it's Freiberger here from Roadkill. I am quarantining pretty hardcore. Staying in my garage, getting some stuff done. I hope you are too. And man, I hope this thing ends soon so we can get back to racing.
Hi everyone, I'm Ira Gabriel from SEMA. I listen to the Aftermarket Insider podcast with Joe Sebergandio. Look forward to seeing you at the races, and I'll see you at the SEMA show. Everybody be safe and wash your hands.
Hi everyone, it's Warren from SEMA. I'm really looking forward to Joe's Aftermarket Insider podcast to help us get through these tough times. We're looking forward to seeing everyone get together again at the SEMA show in November, but until then, stay safe and stay healthy.
All right, how cool. I want to thank Peter, Tammy, Ira. We have a few others, folks, that we reached out to. I think we got Warren Kozikoff on file somewhere. We'd love to have your submissions if you'd like to participate. Hey, that was really cool catching up with Tom G. Good to see Clarence. Clarence is out there doing his deal. I try to get 5-10 minutes of his time in the midst of all he's doing, and we're very fortunate. I'd like to thank some folks who have liked the Insider page on Facebook and supported the show so far. We got a couple hundred folks already that have liked the Aftermarket Insider Facebook page. We urge you to do the same if you'd like. I'd like to recognize Ted Cardenas from Pioneer Car Electronics, Tommy Z from Stingray PR, Marla Moore. Hi, Marla. How are you doing? Wade Kawasaki of Coker Tire. I'd like to give a shout out to my buddy Jim Savis at Motor Age, Joe Parks at Pilot Transportation, our good friends Alex Borla and Elise and David from Borla Industries, John Hotchkiss, good friend Doug Evans, Albin Roca. We talked about Tammy, who everybody loves, Ed Zinke from Power Auto Media. Good talking to you recently. Nick Pachuli, an old Peterson guy who I spent a lot of years with, who's now retired in Palm Spring. Nick's liked the program and is listening in. Jimmy Day, Brad Fanshaw. Brad's got his own popular podcast out there as well you want to check out. The legend Chip Foose and the almost legend Bud Brutzman. Thank you so much for tuning in and liking the page. David Freiberger, Rory Connell, Catherine Reinhart, Miles Kovacs from Dub, Joel Ayers, Luann Brown, Peter Mack, Melissa Dowd, Jerry Pitt, Jonathan Moore, all my partners in crime over at Bonnier Events, our buddies Mike Copeland, and all of our friends at SEMA, including Ira and Warren and Brian and all the guys. I also want to thank my wife Linda and my daughter Nicole for putting up with all my craziness. Guys, look, we're about the second half of the show, and I could do a whole show around this next guest because he's an icon in our industry. He has been there for me for advice about work. He has been available for me when I had legal issues because in addition to everything else Ron does, he's a lawyer. I have chatted with him about things that have nothing to do with the automotive industry. And I've had some of the best nights of my life hanging out with this guy at Piero's restaurant in Las Vegas. He's a friend to many. He's a face that many, many others are familiar with. He's Ron Coleman. He's the current president of Driven Racing Oil. Ron, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
I'm doing great, Joe. And I want to congratulate you on getting this thing started. And, you kind of put me in the wrong spot. After having followed Tom was so informative and it was so interesting. I'm kind of glad I was watching.
Well, here's the thing. I agree. And that's why we had him on. But having you on is as equally of a delight because, you know, Ron, you've been there. There's no expression, been there, done that. I don't know that that applies to anybody as more as it applies to you. What is your take after you're hearing what Tom had to share?
Well, I'm an optimist. I think this whole thing is going to kind of blow over. I mean, last night I was thinking, boy, would I love to go out to dinner, you know, just to go to a restaurant and sit down, have a glass of wine and a good meal. I think there's a lot of pent up demand to get out and do something. And I think by the time the SEMA show rolls around, there's going to be a lot of people who want to go.
Yes, without question. I'm chomping at the bit now, just being in the home, you know, for a month. And I have to still catch myself. I'll wake up one morning and go, you know, hey, the sun's out. I think I'll take a ride. It's like, no, you won't. The only thing I've been doing is going out to get something to eat at the grocery store. And even that, I get verbal whiplashings from my daughter. So, yeah, I think we'll all be looking for a power tour or looking for a SEMA show or looking for a Sandsport Super Show. And I hope that I'm seeing you there. Ron, just as, I guess, notable as the questions were about whether or not we're going to have a SEMA show when we talked to Tom, when it comes to you and the Comp Performance Group, the biggest, I guess, topic is the recent acquisition of the Comp Performance Group by the private equity firm. I guess, first of all, congratulations. And what finally brought this on? Why did you decide to make that change now?
Well, you know, I knew the coronavirus was going to happen, so I thought I better do it. That's what some people think. That's not the truth. The truth is, what we did is we formed a larger company, and that larger company bought EDELBROCK and bought Comp. I'm still involved. I'm still on the board. I'm still involved in some of the operation, not so much the day-to-day, but in trying to figure out what direction we're headed and where we're going. That's the sort of contributions I can make. It was just time. I've also, you know, have an interest in driven racing oil, and I've been wanting to make it bigger and spend more time with it and devote more attention to it. And this gives me the opportunity to do that.
Ron, what are some of the advantages that customers and buyers can expect now with the merging of these two major powerhouses in the industry?
Well, there's a lot going on in our industry. As you well know, there's been a consolidation that's been going on for probably 7 or 8 years now. And as firms get bigger, there are some efficiencies of scale. You know, rather than having 2 HR departments, you can have 1 HR department. Rather than having 2 shipping departments, you can have 1 shipping department. So what we've been able to do and what our thought is we can make everybody more efficient by moving, say, and consolidating the actual shipping to 1 location. We can also do some moving to make manufacturing a little more efficient. There's some things that we do that we could help EDELBROCK with, and there's some things that EDELBROCK does that they could help the Comp Performance Group with. So overall, it's the efficiencies and the economies of scale that you hope to, take advantage of.
With all that said, Ron, how will it work out? Will manufacturing maintain a large footprint here on the West Coast? Will warehousing be shifted over to Memphis? Can you share some of the dynamics with the merge?
Well, I think what's going to happen is Memphis is a distribution hub. Nike, as a matter of fact, right now, Amazon's building a 4 million square foot facility to distribute from. It's a great place to distribute from. So I think they've already begun to move the finished goods here to Memphis. And I think, it's kind of hard to move a foundry. I don't know if you've ever been around a foundry, but you can't pick it up and move it. So I think there's going to be a presence in California still, and there'll be a presence in Memphis. And what we'll try to do is find which area is best at doing what operation, and we'll do it where it needs to be.
interesting you bring that up. I remember being part of a pretty small group of publishers. Myself, Jim Savas, Britt White, Jim Ryan. We all were invited to go out on the Peterson plane and go out to San Jacinto, I believe, which is where Vic was very proud to show off his new foundry decades ago, I would say. So I was curious about the situation with that foundry, knowing how important it was, especially at that time. So it's good to hear that that'll maintain itself out here. When you mentioned, and I was doing some of the homework about you sitting on the board of directors of both EDELBROCK and COMPCAMS, do you find yourself like getting a little bit protective when there's talking about maybe doing a push on an EDELBROCK line, and you know that your heart couldn't help but be with the COMPCAMS line? I mean, you find yourself in those situations at all?
No, the truth is it's this is a team sport, right? And you play for the team. You don't play for the individual. So in effect, what we've been able to do is take the experience we have and think how best to serve each of the businesses and the product lines within the businesses. You know, there's not a lot of crossover as far as competition between the Comp Performance Group and EDELBROCK. And where there is a little competition, what we'll end up doing is figuring out where the best place to put it and probably bolster that particular part of the business.
Ron, without really putting you on the line though, prior to the merge, what was your response when people would ask you to differentiate between the two, and you had that buyer sitting down there and he's wondering if he should spend all his millions with the Comp line or the EDELBROCK line? What were you able to tell those guys about what the differences were?
Well, you know, fortunately, the Comp Performance Group and EDELBROCK are both basic lines. I don't see how anyone can do without them. And, you know, it's kind of funny, but, you know, we answer a lot of phone calls to the CAM helpline here. And, you know, we recommend more manifolds than any other particular part. And so it's a natural for us. You know, we've done extensive testing on the dyno to figure out which cam and which manifold are well paired, because, you know, you can always get the wrong manifold and the wrong cam and they fight each other rather than help each other. So we have the experience and knowledge of knowing how to combine these things for the best result for the end user. And really, you know, I always tell people the most important decision on a camshaft is which one do you get? Because, you know, everybody wants to get the biggest cam they can. And instead, what you need is one that'll function best in your range, your RPM range.
I remember being in the office and just the spectacle that is COMPCAMS, but I also remember there being a family spirit there in the midst of all the guys answering the phones. What do you have, like 20 guys, 15, 20 guys on the phone there?
Yeah, as many as 35.
And the volume of calls, thousands of calls a day that are taking place constantly. Boy, if that's not a breeding ground for R&D and mastering the craft, I don't know what is. I have had the conversation come up before when COMPCAMS is a part of something, you know, you've kind of made it. I remember back in the days when we were selling sponsorships, I was working with NMCA and NYRA and a few other events. Folks may not know that in addition to you being right there filling the industry with all the performance products you needed, you also were there promoting the underbelly of racing with NMCA at the time. You had Acceleration Media, where you then expanded to having your own publishing company. Were there any interesting conversations that you may have had with racing organizations that you were a major sponsor of, and now all of a sudden you're a promoter? Did you have interesting conversations with magazine publishers when now you went from being an advertiser to being a publisher? Did you have any interesting stories when all that started to take place and you started to expand?
Well, I think the most interesting thing that comes to mind is the NMCA was conceived on a bench at the SEMA show. Myself and John McWhorter sat down and started talking about the idea, and we tried to give it away. I took it to the guys at Peterson, and they didn't want it, and they suggested I go to somebody else. And eventually we decided this was something we needed to do. So we just decided to do it ourselves. People forget that we were actually the people that started it and kind of birthed it and took care of it in its infancy. I still have some of the old pictures and all, which I'm trying to box up and send to the NMCA currently so they can put them online.
Well, the NMCA now being run with Pro Media and Steve Walcott, I couldn't think of a better guy that would actually have the ability to take that to the next level. What about the current happenings over at Driven? You mentioned earlier now that maybe some of the efforts and some of the focus that you used with COMPCAMS, you'll now have that time to dedicate towards Driven. I remember the Driven launch when we were visited by Joe Gibbs, and it turned that had a very nice launch and a nice following. I remember visiting all the trade shows and seeing Lake Speed there promoting it. What do you got on the schedule and what's on the docket in terms of what you want to get done now that you're actively focusing in on Driven Racing Oils?
Well, we want to expand the line. You know, one of the things that we have identified a molecule that was actually invented and patented by the Oak Ridge National Laboratory. And we have the exclusive right to use this molecule. So right now we're studying the molecule and using it. It looks like it will replace the zinc, the ZDDP in the oil. And it looks like in some particular applications like gear oil that it has a phenomenal result. Now, all that remains to be seen, but that's just one of the areas we're chasing. You know, we're not trying to make an oil for everybody. We're trying to make an oil specifically formulated for a specific task. You know, Quaker State and Castor Oil and all those others will be around a long time. But if you want something special for your application and needs, it's up to us to figure out a way to make it better than anyone else and do a better job.
And that's really always been your philosophy, hasn't it been, that push that envelope to the breaking point, adjust and go on? Are you staying true to that philosophy, regardless if it's at Comp or whether it's at Driven?
Well, basically, we're trying to make the best of the best. And we've always tried to do it. And every time you make the best, it's kind of like a camshaft. If you make a great camshaft, then you got to make the next great camshaft. And there's never an end to it. There's never enough horsepower. There's never enough R&D that you can put into it. So, and we've been able to invent ways to improve the camshaft industry. Now we're trying to take that same concept and philosophy to invent ways for better lubrication and other ways to help gear oils and other lubricants in the industry.
Ron, did you take the A-team over with you to Driven? Who's over there with you? You got Scooter and Tammy and everybody else. Who's part of that team now?
Well, we're still putting it together. You know, Lake Speed went on to greater and better things. We love Lake. He certainly was kind of the godfather of this particular business.
A great spokesperson for Driven at the time as well, too, Ron.
He loved it, and he did a good job, and we wish him the best of luck. I kind of hope he's going to come back one of these days because he's got it in his veins. If you cut him, it's motor oil that comes out. It's not blood.
Yeah. What a classy guy.
So we also have Rick Sparks, who's been around a good while and is a great guy.
That's for sure.
Scooter, and we've interviewed two other people, and we're trying to decide what we're going to do with those people right now. You know, this virus thing has kind of put everything on hold for a lot of people. And we're trying our best to overcome those things, but in a lot of ways, unless you have a kind of an open field, it's hard to convince someone to come to work, or it's hard to decide to hire somebody when you don't know kind of where the future is going to be. Although I believe we're going to get back to racing soon, you know, a lot of people want to wait and see.
Ron, what do you have to say to some of the folks who may be at home now unemployed that are kind of feeling the pressure? I know some good friends of mine that were consummate pros in their industry were recently affected by some layoffs, and they're at home now wondering when they're going to get their next paycheck. How do they keep their spirits up? Do you have any words of encouragement for those folks?
Well, I think it's like anything else. You know, there are opportunities everywhere. And if you get out of a job, There's going to be another job, probably a better job, and one that you can do a better job with just down the road. So I'd say there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be hired coming out of this thing. And being unemployed, this may not be the worst time to do it.
Yeah, good chance to reflect. Couple things, Ron, before you go. We got a couple of minutes left in the podcast. Want to play a quick little game. It's the name game. Dale Earnhardt.
You want to know my remembrance of Dale?
A quick little quip. Yes.
Well, Dale came and he wanted to see us in person. And we kept wondering why. And he came in and sat down with Scooter and I and said, I want to go NASCAR racing with my own team, but I know I have to have your help. Will you help me? And we said, yes, we'd help you. And we had him sign. We have a hood that we have all our racers sign. And we caught the maid trying to wipe his signature off. That was it, you know.
Not the Dale Earnhardt autograph.
Yeah, that's.
Hey, how about Chuck Blum? What do you remember about Chuck?
Well, you know, I remember Chuck. He was a great guy. He was working hard. He was trying to figure out, you know, at the time I really worked with Chuck was the time we were changing SEMA from kind of a good old boys network into sort of a national and international presence. I mean, they've done a great job. Now it's probably the largest and most important aftermarket show in the world. But at the time we were trying to get there, and it was a tough thing for everybody. A lot of changes were made. And those changes have kind of laid the foundation and groundwork for what we currently have.
How about Iski, the godfather of cams?
You know, I love Iski. Iski's one of my favorite guys. As a matter of fact, we had the AETC, the Advanced Engine Technology Conference, and we'd always ask him to come up, and we'd have a luncheon right before the PRI. And one day I caught him going around taking bread off the table. And I thought, and he's putting them in his pocket. I'm thinking, this guy's hungry or something. So I said, what's wrong? You know, what are you taking the bread for? Well, it turns out he goes home and feeds it to the pigeons over at his office. Well, so we kept a lot of pigeons alive with him.
And you've kept a lot of us alive in the industry, Ron. Thank you so much for taking some time to chat with us. I would go on about all those Olympic medals you got hanging in the backdrop there. I guess we'll save that for another episode. I'm sure it's from the recent Senior Olympic Games. But Ron, as always, such a good time I have when I'm chatting with you. I'll stay in touch. I would hope that you would do the same and keep things intact over there in Memphis, and say hi to all of our friends out there. And if you run into Buckethead, tell him I said hi.
All right. Well, thanks for having me. You had a great show. Thanks.
Thank you, Ron. Well, there you have it. Ron Coleman, the head guru over at Driven Racing Oils, and obviously the leader at the Comp Performance Group with his partner Scooter Brothers over all the years. And, you know, I couldn't be any happier with our premiere podcast. I want to take a moment again to thank our guests, Tom Gattuso, Tom G, affectionately over at SEMA, the SEMA Show Vice President of Events, Ron Coleman, my buddy Clarence Barnes for the Barnes Report. We usually like to give you an idea of when the next podcast is, but we're kind of on the fly now. I like doing it during the day because it is kind of business related. And look at our website for future dates. Emmanuel, is there a date that you're looking at for the next podcast that we can share?
We can definitely do a week from
now.
All
right, so look at next Tuesday at 11 a.m., same bat time, same bat channel. Once again, this podcast was brought to you by our friends at Pioneer Car Electronics. Visit Pioneer Car Electronics website today for all the latest for car audio needs that you may have. Our next podcast next Tuesday, 11 a.m. right here on Facebook Live. On behalf of myself, D1 Productions, Emmanuel Munda, thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you next time. Be safe, stay inside, and we'll all be together at the races real soon.